little girl interrupts millionaire. That's not the real Nanny. He checks the baby monitor. Before we dive deep, subscribe if you know gentle strength is the most enduring. Enjoy the story. In the gleaming towers of Silicon Valley, where smart homes promise perfect security and AI systems guard every precious moment, Julian West believed he had built the ultimate fortress for his family. His company's technology could predict a baby's needs before they cried, track every heartbeat, monitor every breath. But sometimes the most sophisticated systems miss the most important signals of all. This is the story of how a 6-year-old girl's intuition exposed a threat that million-dollar security couldn't detect. A story that will make you question everything you think you know about keeping the ones you love safe. Julian West stood in his glass-walled office 30 floors above the city, watching his empire of smart homes spread across the valley below. 2 years ago, he was on top of the world, a tech billionaire whose innovations were revolutionizing how families stayed connected and secure. Then tragedy struck. A car accident took his wife Sarah just months after their second child was born, leaving Julian to raise 6-year-old Sienna and baby Emma alone. Technology will keep them safe, he whispered to himself each morning, checking the dozens of monitors that tracked every corner of his mansion. Cameras in every room, sensors on every door, biometric locks that recognized family members by their heartbeat. His grief had transformed into an obsession with security, with creating the perfect protective bubble for his children. But this morning felt different. As Julian reviewed the overnight security reports, something nagged at him, a feeling he couldn't quite name. The data was perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. Downstairs in the mansion, Sienna was already awake, her dark eyes studying the new nanny, who had arrived 3 days ago. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The woman looked right, sounded right, even had the same credentials as Chloe, their beloved nanny of 2 years. But Sienna noticed things adults missed. The way this woman held Emma wasn't quite the same. Her laugh was half a note too high. And most importantly, where was the small scar on Chloe's left hand from the kitchen accident last month? As the morning sun streamed through the smart glass windows, automatically adjusting their tint for optimal lighting, neither Julian nor his sophisticated systems realized that the greatest threat to their family was already inside, wearing a familiar face and carrying forged papers. The technology Julian trusted implicitly was about to meet its match in the form of criminal innovation and a little girl's unshakable intuition. Julian straightened his tie and glanced at his watch. The Yamamoto Industries meeting was crucial, a $50 million contract that could secure his company's expansion into the Asian market. He'd been preparing for months, and the Japanese executives were notoriously detail-oriented. Everything had to be perfect. "Sir, the Yamamoto team is arriving now," his assistant Michelle announced through the intercom. Julian took a deep breath, activated the presentation system, and walked toward the conference room where his future waited. The meeting began flawlessly. Charts and graphs materialized on the holographic display, as Julian explained how his company's AI-driven childcare systems could revolutionize family safety across Asia. The Yamamoto executives nodded approvingly at the biometric monitoring, the predictive health analytics, the seamless integration with smart home systems. "Our technology doesn't just watch over children," Julian explained, his confidence building with each slide. "It anticipates their needs, prevents problems before they occur, and gives parents complete peace of mind." Mr. Yamamoto leaned forward, clearly impressed. "This level of security, it must give you great comfort with your own family, West-san." Julian smiled. "Absolutely. My home is the ultimate test environment. My children live within the most advanced protective system ever created." That's when the conference room door burst open. "Daddy!" Sienna's voice cut through the boardroom like a knife. Her small form appeared in the doorway, black hair disheveled, cheeks flushed from running. Julian's heart stopped. His daughter knew never to interrupt business meetings. Never. "Sienna, sweetheart, Daddy is in a very important—" "Dad, she's not Chloe." Sienna's voice cracked with urgency as she rushed to his side. The nanny upstairs, she's not Chloe. Chloe has a scar on her hand from when she cut herself making Emma's bottle. This lady doesn't have a scar. The boardroom fell silent. Julian's face burned with embarrassment as he glanced at the bewildered Japanese executives. His perfect presentation, his carefully constructed image of technological control, was crumbling before his most important clients. Sienna. "Honey, you're confused," Julian said gently but firmly, kneeling to her level. "Chloe is upstairs taking care of Emma. I checked the monitors this morning, everything is fine." But Sienna's grip on his arm tightened. Her dark eyes, so much like her mother's, blazed with an intensity that made Julian pause. "Daddy, please. Just look, really look. It's not her." Julian's mind raced. His daughter was imaginative, yes, but she wasn't a liar. And she'd never ever interrupted a business meeting before. Something in her voice, a desperation he'd never heard, made his chest tighten with sudden unease. Mr. Yamamoto cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps we should take a brief recess, Wes-san. Family first, as we say in Japan." Julian's cheeks burned as he nodded to his assistant. "Michelle, please escort our guests to the executive lounge. Offer them anything they need. I'll be right back." As the executives filed out, Julian felt his carefully constructed world beginning to tilt. His 6-year-old daughter stood before him, trembling but determined, asking him to question the very technology he'd just spent an hour praising as infallible. Julian's hands shook slightly as he pulled up the security feed on his tablet. The executive elevator climbed silently toward the residential floors while Sienna pressed against his side, her small body radiating tension. "See, sweetheart?" Julian said softly, angling the screen toward her. There on the monitor was Chloe, or what appeared to be Chloe, gently rocking baby Emma in the nursery. The woman wore Chloe's favorite yellow cardigan, moved with familiar gestures, even hummed the lullaby that Emma loved. "She's right there taking perfect care of your sister." But Sienna shook her head violently. "Daddy, that's not how Chloe holds Emma. And listen, that's not her voice." Julian studied the feed more carefully. The woman on screen did seem different somehow. Her posture was perhaps a bit too straight, her movements slightly mechanical. And the humming, was it missing Chloe's usual warmth? "I want to see the recordings from yesterday," Sienna insisted. "Can we watch them side by side?" Julian hesitated. His daughter's request was logical, but doubt gnawed at him. If he was wrong, if this was just his grieving child's imagination, running wild, he would have destroyed a $50 million deal for nothing. But if she was right, "Okay," he said finally. "We'll watch yesterday's footage. But then you need to apologize to the nice businessmen, and we'll discuss why interrupting Daddy's meetings is never okay." They reached the private family floor, and Julian led Sienna to his home office. The walls were lined with monitors showing feeds from every corner of the mansion. Julian pulled up yesterday's recordings, syncing them with today's live feed. The difference was subtle but unmistakable. Yesterday's Chloe moved with fluid grace, her voice carrying musical inflections when she spoke to Emma. Today's Chloe was performing, going through the motions with technical precision but lacking the spontaneous affection that characterized their real nanny. Julian's breath caught in his throat. "The voice," he whispered. "It's slightly different." Sienna nodded gravely. "And watch how she picks up Emma. Chloe always supports her head with her left hand, but this lady uses her right. And she keeps looking at the cameras like she knows exactly where they are." A chill ran down Julian's spine. His sophisticated facial recognition system hadn't flagged any inconsistencies. The biometric scanners had confirmed Chloe's identity when she'd entered the house 3 days ago. Every technological safeguard he'd installed was functioning perfectly, reporting no threats, no anomalies, no cause for concern. But his 6-year-old daughter had spotted what millions of dollars in security equipment had missed. Julian's mind raced through the implications. If this woman wasn't Chloe, where was the real nanny? How had an imposter bypassed his supposedly impenetrable security? And most terrifyingly, what did she want with his family? Sienna, he said, his voice steady despite the fear building in his chest. I need you to think very carefully. When did you first notice something was different? 3 mornings ago, Sienna replied without hesitation. When she first arrived, she said hello to me, but she didn't do the secret handshake. Chloe and I always do our secret handshake. Julian closed his eyes. 3 days. An imposter had been alone with his infant daughter for 3 days while he'd remained blissfully unaware, confident in his technological fortress. The weight of his potential failure as a father crashed over him like a wave. That moment when familiar becomes foreign is terrifying. We often trust technology more than our own instincts, but maybe we shouldn't. Julian's fingers trembled as he scrolled through his contacts, landing on a name he'd hoped never to need in an emergency. Cody Mitchell, his former head of security systems. Cody had left the company 6 months ago after a heated argument about security vulnerabilities. Vulnerabilities Julian had dismissed as theoretical impossibilities. Cody, Julian said when the call connected, I need your help. Something's wrong at the house. There was a pause. Julian? Man, it's been months. What kind of wrong? I think someone has infiltrated our security system. I think they've replaced our nanny. Another pause, longer this time. The system I warned you about? The one with the access point vulnerabilities? Julian's jaw tightened. Cody had repeatedly raised concerns about potential bypass methods, ways that sophisticated hackers might circumvent their biometric scanners. Julian had been so confident in his technology, so certain that his innovations were foolproof, that he'd dismissed Cody's warnings as paranoid overthinking. Just, can you get here? Now? I'm 20 minutes out. While they waited, Julian called Mrs. Sylvia, his childhood nanny who occasionally visited to spend time with Sienna. If anyone could spot an imposter, it would be the woman who'd raised him and had an uncanny ability to read people's true intentions. Mrs. Sylvia, I know this sounds strange, but I need you to come to the house. I need your eyes on something. Julian, dear, you sound upset. Is everything all right with the children? I don't know, he admitted. I really don't know. 15 minutes later, Mrs. Sylvia arrived, her silver hair perfectly styled despite the urgent call. At 65, she moved with the purposeful grace of someone who'd spent decades caring for children, and her pale blue eyes missed nothing. Where's my Sienna? She asked, and Julian's daughter flew into her arms. Grandma Sylvia, tell Daddy I'm right about the fake nanny. Mrs. Sylvia held Sienna close, but her eyes were already studying the security monitors. Julian explained the situation while they watched the live feed from the nursery. The woman on screen was feeding Emma, her movements efficient and professional. Mrs. Sylvia murmured after several minutes of observation. Julian, dear, may I ask you something? When Chloe feeds Emma, what does she usually talk about? Julian frowned. Talk about? I don't know. Baby things, I suppose. Chloe always tells Emma stories, Sienna chimed in. About princesses and dragons and magic kingdoms. And she sings the alphabet song when she changes diapers. They all turn back to the monitor. The woman feeding Emma worked in complete silence, her face a mask of concentration. No stories, no songs, no playful chatter that typically accompanied childcare. The way she looks at the baby, Mrs. Sylvia said quietly, her voice carrying decades of experience reading human nature. It's not genuine. There's no love there, no natural affection. She's going through the motions, but her heart isn't in it. Cody arrived shortly after, carrying a tablet and a grim expression. Julian, before we start, I need to say something. Those vulnerabilities I warned you about, they weren't theoretical. I've been tracking unusual network activity around your system for months. Julian felt the room spinning around him. What kind of activity? Someone's been probing your security, looking for ways in. I tried to tell you, but you said the system was impenetrable. Why didn't you insist? Why didn't you? Because you fired anyone who questioned your technology, Cody said bluntly, including me. The truth hit Julian like a physical blow. His arrogance, his blind faith in his own innovations, had made his family vulnerable. He'd been so busy building the perfect system that he'd ignored the human factor, both the criminal intent that might try to breach it and the wisdom of those who cared enough to warn him. Cody's fingers flew across his tablet as he ran comprehensive diagnostics on Julian's security network, lines of complex code scrolling past at lightning speed. Each line represented thousands of hours of development work, millions of dollars, in research and testing, and the accumulated expertise of some of the brightest minds in cybersecurity. Numbers and data streams flowed across the screen, representing every sensor, every camera, every electronic guardian protecting the West family. Julian watched over Cody's shoulder, trying to follow the technical analysis while his heart hammered against his ribs with increasing anxiety. "There," Cody said suddenly, pointing to an anomaly in the data stream that looked like a small gap in an otherwise continuous line. "See this signal interruption? Your system shows continuous monitoring for the past 72 hours, but there's actually a 3-hour window where the feed was looped. Someone recorded normal activity from Tuesday afternoon and played it back on repeat to make everything look normal while they did whatever they needed to do. It's sophisticated work, Julian. This isn't some random break-in or opportunistic crime. This is a carefully planned operation by people who understand your technology almost as well as you do." Julian stared at the screen, his mind refusing to accept what the data was showing him. "Looped? But that's impossible. The system has anti-loop protocols, redundant timestamp verification, multiple integrity checks, all of which have been bypassed with surgical precision," Cody interrupted grimly. "Julian, whoever did this had access to your system architecture, your security protocols, possibly even your source code. They knew exactly how to fool your safeguards because they understood how those safeguards worked. On the security monitor, they watched in real time as the woman they now knew wasn't Chloe lifted Emma from her high chair with practiced efficiency. "She needs a nap," the imposter said to no one in particular, her voice carrying clearly through the high-definition audio feed. "The little one needs more sleep to stay healthy and grow properly." Mrs. Sylvia straightened suddenly, her decades of experience with children providing instant recognition of what was wrong. "Julian, that's not how Chloe speaks to Emma. Chloe would never call her the little one in that clinical way. She always uses Emma's name, and she talks to her like she's having a conversation with a person, not managing a patient. This woman sounds like she's following a script or reciting from a child care manual." Sienna nodded vigorously, her small body practically vibrating with vindicated urgency. "And Emma just ate her lunch. She never sleeps right after eating because it makes her spit up. Chloe knows that. Chloe would play with her for at least 30 minutes before even thinking about a nap. This lady doesn't know anything about Emma's real schedule." Julian watched in growing horror as the fake nanny carried his baby daughter toward the stairs, moving with purpose and determination toward the upper floor bedrooms. Her route was direct and efficient, showing familiarity with the house layout that spoke to careful preparation. Every instinct Julian possessed screamed that something was catastrophically wrong, but his security system continued to report normal activity, normal biometrics, normal everything. The disconnect between what his technology was telling him and what his human intuition was screaming created a cognitive dissonance that left him feeling nauseated and disoriented. "The biometric scanners," Julian said desperately, grasping for some technological explanation that would make sense of the situation. "They confirmed her identity when she entered 3 days ago. Facial recognition, voice pattern analysis, even gait recognition algorithms. Everything checked out perfectly. How could all of those systems be wrong simultaneously?" Cody shook his head grimly, his expression reflecting the hard-earned wisdom of someone who'd spent years studying the arms race between security technology and criminal innovation. "Julian, the technology exists to fool all of those systems individually and collectively. Deepfake technology can create perfect facial replicas using just a few hours of video footage. Voice synthesis can reproduce anyone's speech patterns with remarkable accuracy. Even gait recognition can be defeated with specially designed shoe inserts that alter walking patterns. If someone had access to Chloe's biometric data from your own database, how would they get that data? Julian interrupted, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew the answer. From your own system, Julian. Every time Chloe used the security features over the past 2 years, she was providing biometric samples, fingerprints, retinal scans, voice prints, facial mapping data. It was all stored in your database for authentication purposes. If someone hacked that database, they'd have everything they need to create a perfect biometric replica that would fool your own scanners. The implications crashed over Julian like a tsunami of realization. His own technology, his precious security system that he'd trusted more than his own instincts, had been turned against him with devastating effectiveness. By collecting biometric data to protect his family, he'd actually provided the tools necessary to deceive that same system. The very comprehensiveness of his security measures had created a complete blueprint for circumventing them. On the monitor, they watched the imposter disappear up the stairs with Emma cradled in her arms. The camera feed showed her entering the master bedroom, but something was subtly wrong with the angle of the surveillance. The view was slightly off from what Julian remembered, as if the camera had been carefully adjusted to show what the intruder wanted them to see while hiding what she didn't want them to notice. She's avoiding the nursery camera, Cody observed with the sharp eye of a security professional. Look at her route carefully. She's taking Emma somewhere with limited coverage, staying in the blind spots and using the adjusted camera angles to her advantage. She knows your surveillance system better than most of your own employees do. Julian's blood ran cold as he recognized the tactical thinking behind the imposter's movements. The blind spot near the balcony door. There's a small area where the cameras don't overlap completely because of the structural columns. I always meant to install an additional camera there, but it seemed like such a minor gap. Mrs. Sylvia grabbed his arm with surprising strength, her pale blue eyes blazing with urgency. Julian, you need to call the police right now. Not in 5 minutes. Not after we gather more evidence now. Every second that woman has Emma is a second too long, and we don't know what her ultimate intentions are. But Julian found himself paralyzed by disbelief and the magnitude of his technological failure. Everything he'd built, everything he'd trusted, everything he'd bragged about to investors and clients and competitors was failing catastrophically when his family needed protection most. The biometric locks he'd praised to the Japanese executives were worse than useless. They were actively enabling the threat. The AI systems that were supposed to predict and prevent dangers had been completely fooled by human intelligence and criminal innovation. His $50 million smart home had become a prison where the guards had been replaced by the inmates, and the warden was completely unaware of the substitution. I don't understand, he whispered, staring at the monitors that continued to show normal parameters and peaceful domestic activity. The system is still showing optimal conditions. Look, Emma's vital signs are stable. The room temperature is perfectly controlled. There are no security breaches logged anywhere in the system. According to every piece of technology I have, my family is completely safe. Sienna tugged at his sleeve with the insistence of a child who had learned that adults sometimes needed to be pulled back to reality. Daddy, stop looking at the computers. Look with your eyes and listen with your heart. That lady is stealing Emma right now while you're reading numbers on a screen. From the mouths of babes came the wisdom that Julian had forgotten in his pursuit of technological perfection. He realized that while he'd been staring at data streams and biometric readings, analyzing algorithmic reports and trusting in digital safeguards, his infant daughter was being carried away by a stranger with unknown intentions. All the technology in the world couldn't replace the simple human act of paying attention to what was happening right in front of him, of trusting his instincts and the observations of those who loved his family as much as he did. Show me Emma's sensor bracelet data immediately, Julian demanded, his voice tight with barely controlled panic that threatened to break through his professional composure. Every baby in his family wore a small, nearly invisible bracelet that monitored vital signs, location, and sleep patterns with medical-grade precision. It was one of his company's most advanced products, a piece of wearable technology that parents around the world had praised as revolutionary, supposedly impossible to remove or tamper with without triggering multiple security alerts. Cody pulled up the bracelet's data stream with practiced efficiency, his fingers dancing across the tablet interface as he accessed the real-time monitoring systems. Heartbeat showing normal range, temperature within optimal parameters, Location data indicating nursery level. Julian, wait a minute. His fingers paused over the screen as his analytical mind caught something that didn't fit the expected patterns. The signal strength is too consistent. Look at this. It's not fluctuating the way it should when someone moves around, when a baby's position changes, when they're picked up or put down. Julian leaned over Cody's shoulder, studying the data with growing alarm. The readings were indeed unnaturally stable, showing none of the minor variations that characterized real-time biological monitoring. What are you saying? I'm saying this data looks like it's being generated by a device that's sitting perfectly, still, probably on a table somewhere, rather than being worn by a moving, breathing baby. Sienna, who had been quietly watching the adults work with the intense focus that children brought to situations they sensed were important, suddenly spoke, up with the clarity that comes from unburdened observation. I saw her change the bracelet. All three adults turned to stare at the 6-year-old, their conversations stopping mid-sentence as the significance of her words sank in. What did you say, sweetheart? Mrs. Sylvia asked gently, kneeling to Sienna's level with the patience that came from decades of listening to children's observations. 2 days ago, when the fake Chloe was changing Emma's clothes for her afternoon nap, I was peeking through the door because I wanted to play with Emma before she went to sleep, and I saw her take off the bracelet and put on a different one. It looked exactly the same color, same size, same everything, but she was very careful with the original one, like it was really important and she didn't want to break it or lose it. Julian felt the world tilt beneath his feet as the implications of his daughter's observation crashed over him like a physical blow. Sienna, why didn't you tell me this before? This is incredibly important information. I tried. Sienna's voice cracked with the frustration of a child who had been attempting to communicate something crucial to adults who weren't listening. I told you something was different about Chloe, but you said I was imagining things. You said the computers knew better than me, and that little girls sometimes make up stories when they're worried about changes in the house. The accusation hit Julian like a dagger to the heart, each word carrying the weight of his failure as both a father and a protector. His own daughter had tried to warn him about a clear and present danger to their family, and he'd dismissed her concerns because he trusted his technology more than her observations. How many other signs had he missed in his obsession with digital data? How many warnings had he ignored because they didn't conform to what his sophisticated algorithms were telling him? Cody was already moving, pulling up detailed schematics of the sensor bracelet's construction on his tablet. If someone had access to our design specifications and manufacturing details, they could create a transmitter that perfectly mimics the bracelet's signal patterns. It would show normal readings for hours or even days while the real bracelet is somewhere else entirely. Julian finished, the horrible truth dawning on him with crystalline clarity. Showing Emma's actual location while we've been watching fake data. We need to search Emma's room immediately, Mrs. Sylvia said with the decisive authority that came from a lifetime of dealing with crises involving children. If the bracelet was switched, we might find the real one hidden somewhere nearby. Criminals often keep evidence close at hand, especially when they're working in unfamiliar territory. They raced upstairs, Julian's heart pounding as they approached the nursery that had always been his daughter's sanctuary. The room looked exactly as it should, toys neatly arranged according to Emma's preferences, clothes folded in the dresser with military precision, the mobile above the crib spinning gently in the conditioned air. But when Julian looked closer, with the heightened awareness that fear had given him, he noticed things that Sienna had been trying to tell him about for days. The stuffed animals were arranged differently than Chloe's usual pattern. Their real nanny always placed Emma's favorite teddy bear on the left side of the crib, where the baby could see it when she woke up. But it was now positioned on the right side, like a stranger mimicking what they thought was correct. The baby monitor was angled differently than its usual position, and there were small scratches around the screws that held it to the wall, fresh marks that indicated recent tampering. The monitor's been modified, Cody confirmed after examining the device with the practiced eye of a security professional. Someone's replaced the internal components with their own hardware. This isn't broadcasting to your system anymore. It's sending whatever feed they want you to see. Mrs. Sylvia was conducting her own methodical search through Emma's clothing and belongings, her experienced hands checking every pocket, every fold, every possible hiding place with the thoroughness that came from years of finding things that children had lost or hidden. "Here," she said suddenly, her voice tight with discovery as she pulled a small electronic device from inside a onesie that had been carefully folded and placed at the bottom of a drawer. "This is the real bracelet." The device in her weathered hand looked identical to the one Emma was supposedly wearing, but when Cody connected it to his tablet using a specialized interface cable, it told a dramatically different story than the peaceful domestic scene they'd been watching on their monitors. "GPS signal is moving," he said, his voice grim with the confirmation of their worst fears. "It's currently about 2 miles from here, heading steadily toward the highway system. Based on the movement pattern and speed, they're in a vehicle, probably trying to reach a major transportation hub." Julian stared at the small device that represented his daughter's actual location, feeling the full weight of how completely he'd been deceived. For 3 days, he'd been watching an elaborate lie unfold on his monitors. For 3 days, his vaunted security system had been feeding him false information, while a stranger planned whatever she intended to do with his family. For 3 days, he'd ignored his older daughter's increasingly desperate attempts to warn him that something was wrong. "Who is she?" he whispered, his voice barely audible above the sound of his own heartbeat. "What does she want with Emma?" Cody's expression was dark, with the kind of understanding that came from years in the security business. Given the sophistication of this operation, the biometric spoofing, the system infiltration, the careful long-term planning, I'd guess corporate espionage. Someone wants your technology badly enough to infiltrate your home and replace your staff. This isn't about money or random crime. This is about stealing intellectual property. But why take Emma? Why risk kidnapping a child when they could just hack our servers or bribe our employees? "Because," Mrs. Sylvia said quietly, her voice carrying the weight of terrible understanding, "Emma isn't just your daughter to these people. She's also your primary test subject. All the biometric data, all the AI learning algorithms, everything your system knows about predicting and caring for children, it's all based on Emma's patterns, isn't it?" The full scope of the violation hit Julian like a lightning bolt of realization. Someone hadn't just stolen his technology. They'd stolen his daughter's most intimate data, her sleep patterns, her health information, her daily routines, her biological rhythms, even her emotional responses to different stimuli. Everything that made her unique as an individual had been harvested, analyzed, and copied for purposes he couldn't even imagine. Her childhood had been commodified without her knowledge or consent. And now they had Emma herself, the source of all that data, the living blueprint for the next generation of childcare AI systems. In the wrong hands, his daughter's biological patterns could be used to create technology that could manipulate or exploit children on a massive scale. Julian's hand shook as he reached for his phone to dial 911, but Cody grabbed his wrist with the quick reflexes of someone who understood the delicate dynamics of hostage situations. "Wait, Julian. Think about this carefully. If we call the police now and they come screaming up to the house with sirens and flashing lights, whoever took Emma will know immediately that we've figured out their deception. They might panic, might hurt Emma, or might disappear completely before we have any chance of getting her back safely. You want me to not call the police when my daughter has been kidnapped?" Julian's voice cracked with barely contained panic, his paternal instincts warring with his rational mind. Every fiber of his being screamed that he should involve law enforcement immediately, that every second of delay was a second of increased danger for Emma. "I want you to be smart about this," Cody replied firmly, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had dealt with security crises before. "Look at the GPS signal on the real bracelet. She's still moving slowly through city traffic, probably stuck in the afternoon rush hour congestion. If we move fast and coordinate properly, we might be able to intercept her before she reaches wherever she's trying to take Emma. But if we spook her with a premature police response, she could disappear into the underground networks that support this kind of operation." Mrs. Sylvia placed a calming hand on Julian's shoulder, her touch carrying decades of experience in dealing with family crises. Julian, dear, Cody is absolutely right about being strategic, but we also can't wait too long. Every minute Emma is with that woman is a minute too long, and we don't know what resources or backup plans these people might have. Sienna had been quiet through this tense exchange, but now she stepped forward with a determination that reminded Julian painfully of her mother's fierce protectiveness. Daddy, I want to help catch the bad lady who took Emma. Absolutely not, Julian said immediately, his parental instincts overriding everything else. You're going to stay here with Mrs. Sylvia where it's safe. I can't risk losing you too, sweetheart. But I'm the only one who can tell if it's really her or not, Sienna argued with the logical persistence that made her such a formidable 6-year-old. What if she has more disguises? What if she changes her appearance again? What if the police get confused and arrest the wrong person while the real bad lady escapes? Julian knelt down to his daughter's level, taking her small hands in his much larger ones. The contrast reminded him of how fragile and precious she was, how much he'd already lost, and how much more he could lose if he made the wrong decisions. Now, Sienna, you've already saved Emma by noticing what I missed. You've been braver and smarter than any adult in this room, but I can't risk having anything happen to you too. Do you understand? Tears welled up in Sienna's dark eyes, and Julian saw his own fear reflected there, along with something that broke his heart. Guilt. I should have told you sooner about the bracelet, she whispered. I should have made you listen harder. Maybe if I'd been braver, Emma wouldn't be gone. No, sweetheart, Julian said firmly, pulling her into a fierce hug. This isn't your fault, it's mine. I should have listened to you from the very beginning. You tried to warn me, and I ignored you because I thought my machines were smarter than my own daughter. This is my mistake, not yours. Julian's phone buzzed with an urgent alert from his security system, interrupting the emotional moment with harsh reality. The fake nanny was back in view of the cameras, but she was alone. Now moving through the house with purposeful efficiency, she was in the kitchen opening cabinets with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what she was looking for, her movements quick and practiced. She's looking for the backup drives, Cody realized with growing alarm. All your system data. All the AI learning algorithms, the complete blueprint for your childcare technology. You keep physical backups in the kitchen safe, don't you? Julian nodded grimly, his stomach sinking as he realized the full scope of what was being stolen. Hidden behind the spice rack. But how did she know about that? Only 3 people in the world know that location. Me, my head of security, and your real nanny, Mrs. Sylvia finished quietly. Chloe would have seen you access it during security updates. These people have been watching your family for months, Julian. They know your routines, your habits, your security measures better than you realize. On the monitor, they watch the imposter locate the hidden safe with unerring accuracy and begin working on the electronic lock. Her fingers moved across the keypad with the confidence of someone who either knew the combination or had sophisticated tools for bypassing it. Her movements were confident and practiced. She'd done this before, probably many times. We need to stop her from getting those drives, Julian said, his voice hardening with resolve. Without them, whoever she's working for only has Emma's current biological data and whatever they've observed over the past few days, but with the backup drives, they'd have everything, Cody finished grimly. 2 years of AI development, thousands of hours of biological monitoring data, machine learning algorithms worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and the complete roadmap for the next generation of childcare technology. Mrs. Sylvia stood up, with the decisive movement of someone who had made up her mind. Then we need to coordinate our response. Cody, you track Emma's location using the real bracelet and coordinate with the police. Give them all the information they need to intercept the vehicle safely. Julian, you need to secure those backup drives and deal with the imposter downstairs. I'll stay with Sienna and monitor the house cameras to provide real-time intelligence. What about the fake Chloe downstairs? Sienna asked with the practical concern of a child who understood that dangerous people needed to be stopped. Let me handle her, Julian said, surprising himself with the steel in his voice. For 2 years since, Sarah's death, he'd thrown himself into technology and business, avoiding confrontation and emotional risk. But now, faced with a direct threat to his children, he felt something awakening in him that he'd forgotten he possessed. The fierce protectiveness of a father who would do anything to keep his family safe. As they prepared to put their plan into action, Julian realized how completely his perspective had changed in the space of a few hours. This morning, he'd been a technology CEO who believed machines could solve any problem and prevent any threat. Now, he was a father who understood that protecting his family required more than sophisticated algorithms. It required human judgment, human intuition, human courage, and the willingness to act decisively when those machines failed. Sienna hugged him tightly before he left, her small arms wrapping around his waist with surprising strength. "Daddy, bring Emma home safe. And remember, sometimes the computers are wrong, but families who love each other are never wrong about what matters." "I promise, sweetheart. And from now on, I promise to listen when you tell me something is wrong. Your eyes see things my cameras can't detect, and your heart knows things my algorithms can't calculate. When technology fails, when systems break down, when the sophisticated solutions prove inadequate, that's when we discover what we're really made of." Julian moved through his own house like a stranger discovering it for the first time, seeing familiar spaces through new eyes that had been opened by fear and betrayal. Every camera angle, every sensor placement, every piece of technology he'd installed to create perfect security, all of it had been turned against him with surgical precision. The woman downstairs had studied his system so thoroughly that she understood its capabilities and limitations better than he did, exploiting weaknesses he hadn't even known existed. He paused at the top of the main staircase, his heart hammering against his ribs as he watched the security monitors on his phone. The fake Chloe had successfully bypassed the electronic locks on his kitchen safe and was now downloading data from the backup drives with the efficiency of a professional. Her movements were quick and purposeful. She knew exactly what she was looking for and how to extract it without triggering additional security alerts. Julian's earpiece crackled with Cody's voice, providing updates that made his blood run cold. "GPS tracking shows Emma's location has stopped moving. She's at the old warehouse district by the port, about 15 minutes from your house. I'm coordinating with police now, but they need at least 20 minutes to get tactical units in position without alerting the suspects." 20 minutes. 20 minutes while his infant daughter was held by people who viewed her not as a precious child, but as a valuable asset in their corporate espionage scheme. 20 minutes while strangers with unknown intentions had complete control over the most important thing in his world. Julian took a deep breath and walked down the stairs, making no effort to be quiet or stealthy. His footsteps echoed in the marble foyer with deliberate authority. He wanted the intruder to know he was coming. The fake Chloe looked up as he entered the kitchen, her expression shifting from intense concentration to surprise to something much more dangerous in the space of a heartbeat. "Mr. West," she said smoothly, her voice immediately taking on Chloe's familiar warm tone with practiced ease. "I was just checking on the backup systems in your security cabinet. I noticed some irregular readings on the monitoring display and wanted to make sure everything was functioning properly for the children's safety." Even now, standing in front of his violated safe with stolen data in her hands, she was maintaining the charade with professional dedication. Julian found himself oddly impressed by her commitment to the role. Even as rage built in his chest like a gathering storm, her ability to lie so convincingly while looking him directly in the eye spoke to training and experience that went far beyond simple criminal opportunism. "Where's Emma?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying a calmness that surprised him. "Upstairs, sleeping peacefully, of course," she replied without hesitation, her expression showing just the right amount of confusion and concern. "I just put her down for her afternoon nap about 20 minutes ago. She was a little fussy, but I think she's coming down with a small cold. Nothing serious, but you know how important it is to monitor children carefully when they're not feeling their best." "No," Julian said, pulling out his phone to show the GPS tracker data from Emma's real sensor bracelet. "Emma is 2 miles away from here, being held by your accomplices at a warehouse near the port. And you're not Chloe." For just a moment, the carefully constructed mask slipped completely. The woman's expression hardened into something cold and calculating, and Julian saw the professional criminal beneath the borrowed kindness. Her posture shifted subtly, becoming more alert and potentially dangerous. Then, just as quickly, she was Chloe again, confused, hurt, and deeply concerned about his apparent mental state. "Mr. West, I don't understand what you're saying." "I'm Chloe. I've been caring for your family for 2 years. Are you feeling all right? Maybe the stress of your business meeting this morning, combined with the emotional pressure you've been under since Sarah's death." She let the implication hang in the air, suggesting that grief and professional pressure had caused him to have a psychological break from reality. "Stop." Julian's voice carried an authority he didn't know he possessed, cutting through her performance like a knife. "I know who you are. I know what you've done. The only question now is whether you're going to help me get my daughter back, or whether I'm going to have to call the police and let them sort this out while you face charges for kidnapping, burglary, corporate espionage, and whatever else they can prove." The woman, Marla, Cody had discovered through facial recognition databases and criminal record searches, studied Julian carefully with the calculating gaze of someone weighing risks and options. He could see her analyzing his body language, assessing his emotional state, deciding how to proceed now that her cover had been blown beyond any hope of repair. "You know," she said, finally dropping the false accent and artificial warmth entirely, "your security system really is quite impressive. It took our team months to find a way around all the safeguards and redundancies. Your biometric scanners are particularly sophisticated, much more advanced than most commercial systems." "Your team?" Julian asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. "Did you really think this was a one-person operation?" Marla laughed, and there was no humor in the sound at all. "Your company's technology is worth billions to the right buyers. Your daughter's biometric data alone could accelerate childcare AI development by years, maybe decades. Do you have any idea how valuable that information is to companies developing competing products?" Julian felt physically sick as the full scope of their violation became clear. "She's a baby. She's an innocent child who's never hurt anyone. She's also the most comprehensively monitored infant in human history," Marla replied with chilling clinical detachment. "Every heartbeat recorded and analyzed, every sleep pattern mapped and categorized, every cry cataloged and interpreted by machine learning algorithms. 2 years of continuous biological and behavioral data from a single subject. Do you have any idea how rare and valuable that kind of longitudinal data set is?" "Who are you working for?" Julian demanded, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. Marla's smile was cold and professional. "Does it matter? There are at least a dozen companies that would pay anything for your research data and the biological patterns that created it. Your mistake was thinking you could keep it all to yourself, that you could build this technological empire without competitors trying to level the playing field." Julian's phone buzzed with a message from Mrs. Sylvia upstairs. "Police are in position at the warehouse. Cody says they need 5 more minutes to ensure Emma's safety during the rescue operation." 5 more minutes. Julian had to keep Marla talking for 5 more minutes, while police moved to rescue Emma without alerting the kidnappers to their presence. 5 more minutes to prevent this woman from escaping with years of stolen technology and personal data about his family. "You know what the funny thing is?" Julian said, forcing himself to sound conversational despite the fear and rage coursing through his system. "My 6-year-old daughter figured out you weren't Chloe 3 days ago. All this sophisticated planning, all this high-tech deception, and a child saw right through it because she paid attention to details that your research missed." Marla's expression darkened with something that might have been professional embarrassment. "Children notice irrelevant details. Adults focus on what matters for achieving objectives." "Is that what you think?" Julian asked. "That a child's safety and a family's privacy are irrelevant details compared to your corporate espionage objectives?" Julian's phone exploded with notifications as multiple things happened at once. Cody's voice crackled through his earpiece. "Police have Emma. Repeat, the baby is safe and secure. They found her in the warehouse with 2 other suspects." At the tea-dine, same time, Marla lunged for the kitchen door. The stolen data drives clutched in her hand. But Julian was ready for her. 2 years of grief had taught him that some things were worth fighting for, and he wasn't about to let this woman escape after what she'd put his family through. "The police have Emma," he said, blocking her path. "And they have your accomplices. It's over." Marla's composure finally cracked completely. "You don't understand what you're interfering with. This technology could revolutionize childcare worldwide. Your daughter's data could save thousands of lives. By stealing it? By kidnapping a baby? By making it available to researchers who aren't motivated by profit?" Julian stared at her in disbelief. "You kidnapped my infant daughter and you think you're the good guys? We think children's welfare shouldn't be controlled by billionaires who care more about market dominance than—" She never finished the sentence. Julian's advanced smart lock system, responding to his emergency override command, sealed every exit in the house. Marla was trapped in the kitchen when the police arrived 2 minutes later. As the officers led her away, Julian felt his legs give out. He sank into a kitchen chair, overwhelmed by relief, exhaustion, and the magnitude of what had almost happened. His technology had failed him when it mattered most, but his daughter's intuition had saved them all. Mrs. Sylvia appeared in the doorway with Sienna, who launched herself into Julian's arms. "Daddy, is Emma okay? Did they catch the bad lady?" "Emma is safe," Julian whispered into his daughter's hair. "The police have her, and she's coming home. And yes, they caught the bad lady." "What happens now?" Sienna asked. Julian looked around. His kitchen? Seeing the opened safe, the scattered technology, the evidence of how completely his security had been compromised. Then he looked at his daughter, the child whose sharp eyes and brave heart had exposed a threat that millions of dollars in equipment had missed. "Now we learn," he said. "We learn that the best security isn't in firewalls or algorithms or biometric scanners. The best security is in families who pay attention to each other, who listen when something feels wrong, who trust their instincts even when technology says everything is fine." 30 minutes later, Emma was back in his arms, babbling happily, as if nothing had happened. Julian held both his daughters close, feeling their heartbeats, breathing in their familiar scents, overwhelmed by the simple miracle of their presence. "Daddy," Sienna said softly, "next time I tell you something is wrong, will you believe me?" "Next time," Julian promised, "I'll listen to you before I look at any computer screen. Your eyes see things my cameras miss. Your heart knows things my algorithms can't calculate." As the sun set over Silicon Valley, Julian West realized that the most advanced security system ever created was sitting right there in his arms. 2 children who loved each other enough to notice when something threatened their family and who trusted him enough to speak up when they sensed danger. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd spent millions trying to protect his family with technology, only to discover that his greatest protection had been there all along. The wisdom of children and the power of really paying attention to the people we love. 6 months later, Julian West stood before another boardroom full of executives. But this presentation was fundamentally different from the one that had been interrupted by his daughter's desperate warning. Instead of charts showing technological capabilities and algorithmic sophistication, the screen displayed a simple but profound message. The highest security is not in firewalls, it's in observant children who feel safe enough to speak up when something seems wrong. "Ladies and gentlemen," Julian began, his voice carrying a confidence born not of technological superiority but of hard-earned wisdom, "I want to tell you about the day my company's most advanced security system failed completely, and how my 6-year-old daughter saved my family with nothing more than careful observation, brave communication, and the courage to trust her own instincts even when adults dismissed her concerns." He told them the complete story. Sienna's interrupted meeting, the overlooked warning signs that sophisticated algorithms had missed, the biometric deception that had fooled millions of dollars in security equipment, and the corporate espionage plot that had nearly succeeded because he'd trusted machines more than his own daughter's observations. He explained how a child's attention to human details had exposed threats that artificial intelligence couldn't detect, and how family love had proven more effective than any technological solution. After that day, we fundamentally redesigned our entire security philosophy, Julian continued, his presentation style now focused on collaboration rather than technological dominance. We still use advanced technology, but now we build it to enhance human judgment rather than replace it. We create systems that encourage family members to trust their instincts, to communicate their concerns effectively, and to pay attention to the subtle details that only human hearts and minds can detect and interpret. The new approach had been revolutionary in the industry. Instead of promoting ever more sophisticated automation, Julian's company now developed what they called collaborative intelligence systems, technology designed to amplify human observation rather than substitute for it. Parents using their updated products reported feeling more connected to their children, more aware of subtle changes in behavior or health, and more confident in their own parenting instincts. In the audience, Mr. Yamamoto raised his hand with respectful curiosity. "Wes-san, what happened to your original contract proposal with our company? I understand we postponed our negotiations during your family crisis." Julian smiled, remembering the kindness these executives had shown during the worst day of his life. "You postponed a crucial business meeting to allow me to protect my family, sir. That act of human compassion and understanding meant more to me than any business deal ever could. And now, 6 months later, we're offering you something much more valuable than our original technology. We're offering you security systems that work with families rather than instead of them, that enhance human connection rather than replacing it with artificial alternatives." The presentation was not only a success but led to partnerships that transformed how childcare technology was developed and marketed worldwide. But Julian's real victory was waiting for him at home, in the people who mattered most to him. As he walked through his front door that evening, Sienna ran to greet him with the enthusiasm of a child who knew she was loved and valued. Emma, now toddling on increasingly steady legs, followed behind her sister with babbling attempts at daddy that filled Julian's heart with joy. "How was your meeting today?" Sienna asked, taking his hand with the natural affection of a daughter who felt secure in her father's attention and respect. "It was wonderful," Julian said, kneeling to embrace both his daughters at once. "I told them about the time my brilliant daughter saved our entire family, and how she taught me that the most important technology is the love and attention we give each other." "And what did the business people say?" Sienna asked with the curiosity of a child who understood that she had played an important role in something significant. "They said they want to learn from you. They want to build security systems that listen to children like you instead of ignoring them, that help families pay attention to each other instead of replacing human connection with computer analysis." Sienna beamed with pride at the recognition of her contribution, then grew thoughtful in the way that showed she was processing something important. "Daddy, promise me something." "Anything, sweetheart. Promise me you'll always remember that computers are just tools to help us take better care of each other. The real security, the kind that actually keeps families safe, is when people who love each other pay attention and listen and trust what their hearts are telling them." Julian looked at his 6-year-old daughter, this wise and brave little person who had seen through a sophisticated deception and had possessed the courage to speak truth to power when it mattered most. He thought about all the technology he'd created over the years, all the systems he'd built, all the innovations he'd been so proud of developing and marketing. None of it mattered as much as this moment. 2 children who felt safe enough to come to him with their concerns, who trusted him enough to share their observations, and a father who had finally learned to value human wisdom over artificial intelligence. "I promise," he said, meaning it with every fiber of his being. "I promise to always remember that the most sophisticated security system ever created is a family that loves each other enough to pay attention, to listen carefully, and to trust the wisdom that comes from human hearts." Outside, the sun was setting over Silicon Valley, painting the sky in brilliant colors that no digital display could replicate. In houses throughout the valley, families were gathering for dinner, children were sharing the events of their day, and parents were hopefully learning the same lesson Julian had learned through his family's crisis, that the most advanced security technology in the world could never replace the simple power of love combined with attention, innovation guided by human wisdom, and the fundamental act of believing in the people who matter most. The security cameras in Julian's house still functioned perfectly. The biometric scanners still verified identities with remarkable accuracy, and the AI system still monitored thousands of data points every second. But now they serve a different purpose, not as replacements for human judgment, but as tools to help a loving family stay connected and aware. The technology had become what it should have been all along, a servant of human relationships rather than a substitute for them. This story reminds us that in our rush to create perfect technology, we sometimes forget the perfect security system we already possess, the intuition of those who love us and the courage to trust their voices. If this story moved you, if it made you think about how you balance technology and human judgment in your own life, please like this video and subscribe to our channel for more stories that explore what it means to be human in a technological world. Share this with someone who needs to remember that sometimes the smallest voices carry the most important truths, and that the most sophisticated systems can be defeated by simple human wisdom. In your own life, take a moment today to really listen to the children around you. They might be seeing something that all of us adults are missing. Thank you for watching, and remember, the best security system ever created is a family that pays attention to each other with love, respect, and genuine curiosity about what each person has to contribute.